One of them is they use these economic models. And these economic models are based primarily on the president's current standing, usually measured by presidential approval, and some measure of economic well-being. It's often a change in personal disposable income across a specific period of time. In the Hibbs model, he is projecting that Mitt Romney will receive 51.5% of the vote, and he is 90% confident of that. Hibbs uses the change in per capita disposable income across 4 years. There's a substantial conversation among political scientists and people who use these models whether that's the right reference period, 4 years, or whether it's a shorter, more recent period of economic recovery, the last year or the last 9 months. Lewis, Beck, and Tien have a nowcast in September that gives Romney 51.8% of the popular vote. So there's 2 of these forecasts that estimate a very slight majority for Romney. Then there's a set of models that also involve simulations. I'm going to talk a little more about simulations in a minute. And they show that Obama wins. In the simulation, they take these data, they put them in a statistical model which has probabilistic parameters around some of the estimates. So they produce an estimate, and then they run it through the simulation again. They produce another estimate, another estimate, another estimate. 58.4% of the models of the simulations show Obama winning under considerations of 0% economic growth, which is where we are, and 48% approval. Obama's approval rating currently is just a little bit higher than that. Alan Abramowitz has an incumbency component in his model. He gives Obama 50.6%. Erickson and Vliesian look at the behavior of the trial heat polls across the campaign. They look at historical data and then sort of project it on the contemporary data. They give Obama 52.6% and 80% chance of winning. And Helmut Northrup uses a model that he calls the history and primary model. He puts a lot of weight on whether or not the president has to run in the New Hampshire primary or not, whether he's an incumbent president is contested or not. He gives Obama 53.2% and an 88% chance of winning. You may know that there are places where you can bet on the outcome of the election. One of them is a commercial website in Ireland called Intrade. And you can see that based upon the shares that are bought in Obama or in Mitt Romney, that it's 60.5% for Barack Obama, and there's been $7.9 million on him. It's about evenly divided, but 60-40 is a pretty good difference. There's a market that's run by the Department of Economics at the University of Iowa. It's very similar. They create special markets for a variety of public events, and they also have 53.9% for Obama and 60-something% as the 69.4% is the probability that he'll win. These are odds at Ladbrokes. If you wanted to go to London or go on the web, you could bet on the odds, and the odds are almost 2.5 to 1 on Obama winning. This is a map which estimates state-level outcomes And again, it uses this blue and red designation for states that are in one side or the other, plus 95 electoral votes as toss-ups in the swing states. You can see that Obama has a slight lead in solid and leaning states, but there are these toss-up states, and they have now made Michigan, for example, leaning Democratic, but Wisconsin and Iowa are still in the toss-up category, and here's Ohio and Virginia. They've now made North Carolina leaning Romney. I mentioned when I was here last time about this website, Nate Silver. You know that Nate Silver was born in Lansing, East Lansing. His dad is a political scientist at Michigan State. He's an economist by training. He had the most accurate estimate of the outcome of the 2008 election, within one electoral vote. And he produces now a daily estimate. If you go to Nate's website, you can track this change over time. And he produces a variety of estimates. This is from today. He is estimating that Barack Obama is going to win 315 electoral votes with 51.5% of the popular vote. And he's assigning a 79.8% probability that he will win. So now you're probably wondering, why do all of these models say that the election is going to be so close, but Barack Obama has such a high, relatively high probability of winning? And the answer is that when you do these simulations, you can think of them as producing a set or a sequence of paths to get to 270 or higher. And these simulations suggest, across a number of models and a number of methods, that there are more combinations of states that Barack Obama can use to get 270 electoral votes than Mitt Romney. And so even though the popular vote is expected to be close, there is a kind of an advantage. And despite the fact that Barack Obama lost these 6 electoral votes from the equivalent outcome in 2008, there is an expectation that there are more combinations of states to produce 270 for Barack Obama. So let me just say a couple of things about what's going to come next in the next 7 weeks, and then I'll be happy to take questions. So first of all, we're in a period post-convention where the major public pollsters are shifting their base from registered voters to likely voters. We don't know what likely voters are because they don't usually divulge their methodology. And defining likely voters is part of the sort of secret sauce that polling organizations use to produce their estimates. And they think of it as proprietary. But I told you at the very beginning that when we narrow the electorate from all adults to registered voters to likely voters, that we get progressively more Republican estimates. So it's very likely in the next week or 10 days we could see reports of the race tightening. I'm leaving aside now the events of the last 24 hours. That we could see these results tightening only because there's a shift in the methodology. Okay. Then the next thing is debates. And we have these 4 debates coming up. They start on October 3rd. You can see that 2 of them are in swing states. And 2 of them will involve foreign policy at some level. This is supposed to be an advantage for the incumbent president. Well, we'll have to see how the debate preparation goes. They're going to start with domestic policy. There are some, I think of the world as relatively stable currently. We don't expect between now and November 6th to have a crisis in the euro, for example. We don't expect to have an economic crisis. And generally, these protests that involve Muslims against what they believe are anti-Muslim actions tend to be relatively short-lived. We don't expect to see these demonstrations go on for the next 7 weeks until Election Day. So what kind of unknown events could happen in the next 7 weeks to affect the U.S. election? I think there's possibly one event that could shake up the scene, and that would be if Israel were to take some independent action against Iran. Both of the campaigns have to know about this, and both of the campaigns have to have devoted some attention and preparation to statements should this arise. Otherwise, the campaign is going to, we know what the framework for the campaign is, and we know it's going to be a contest between directions for the future and trying to hold Barack Obama accountable for his record in the last 4 years. Healthcare is going to be an extensive part of this conversation. One of the things that's been to me relatively amazing about the events of the last 8 or 10 weeks is the inability of the Romney campaign to focus on the state of the economy and to assign responsibility to the Obama administration, because when these events happen, these interruptions, and they lose news cycles, 2 or 3 news cycles at a clip, on coverage of one of these events or a statement that Romney made, or the release of this little video from the fundraising event, it is diverting them from their central message. They now have only about 48 news cycles left. And we have to see whether or not they're able to refocus and to capture the interest of the American public in this regard. When I said that these are websites that you can go to look for information about the campaign, when I said that, I'll just say in conclusion, when I said that this was going to be an election about mobilization and getting your supporters to the polls, that's why this issue of voter suppression is so important and critical to the campaigns. I'll be happy to answer questions about these efforts, the source of these efforts, whether they're empirically justified or not. But most of these efforts to place increased scrutiny on voters and their access to a ballot is occurring in battleground states and has been organized by groups associated with the Republican Party, linked to the Republican Party, not directly, but for example, many of them are supported by Tea Party activists. And we'll have to see how this plays out in terms of turnout and the division of the vote on Election Day. Thanks. Yes.
I was just wondering, historically, what does the data show that the impact of the debates that are upcoming, what has that been?
Well, there's limited data on debates, and they show primarily that it's news assessments that affect or that impact the consequence of the debates. So that's why we have all of this discussion prior to a debate about who's supposed to do better, who's the more experienced debater, and so on. So that's part of reducing expectations. But then things happen during the debates. The audiences, the direct audience for the debates is very small. So the impact of the debates is the interpretation of experts in the news media about what happened during the debates. And so it takes a news cycle or two to see what that impact would be. They don't usually have a great deal of impact. we think of this debate between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter as being very important, and it was quite significant in the 1980 campaign. But they had a big dispute about whether they were going to have debates or not. And there was delay and delay and delay, and then they had this debate that was in the week before the election, and Reagan asked this very pointed question, which seemed to have caught Jimmy Carter unaware. He couldn't answer or respond to this, and so we attach a great deal of significance to debates because of that. But the candidates learned from this. We now have a commission on presidential debates that takes care of all of the arrangements and the scheduling and so on. But it's all negotiated through the campaigns. And we don't have any presidential debates within 2 weeks of the election day anymore, because candidates believe they need time to recover from any possible mistake or misinterpretation. So it's unlikely we would have or observe that kind of impact again. Yes?
How do you think the ballot initiatives will impact the election of Michigan?
Well, I think that this is, hard to figure, because I mentioned that I think my general expectation is that turnout will be down from 2008. It's possible that, there are interest groups supporting different proposals who also can be associated with parties. So there's a proposal that relates to unions' rights to organize and so on. And unions, even in their diminished size and strength, still tend to support Democratic candidates. So in some cases, trying to get union members to the polls to support or oppose a particular issue could have an indirect partisan consequence. But I think there's still down ballot items. I think we still expect to see roll-off, lower turnout for the referenda than for, say, the top of the ticket, the presidential race. I don't expect there to be a substantial effect. Yes?
How do you see greater diversity in the U.S. population affecting the base of both parties?
Well, the Republicans are currently at a disadvantage with regard to diversity because of their recent history with regard to African American voters, but also because of their reluctance to support various elements of immigration reform. So the Democrats, in the recent past have been able to make inroads or maintain their majority among African Americans, and to make inroads among Latino voters. This is a strange kind of demographic phenomenon, because the way of the United States is for whites to become minority. We can see this in California already. So the future of any political party has got to involve incorporating members of these various groups into their organization. But I would say that currently the Democrats have the upper hand in this. Yes?
In 2008, most older voters voted for McCain. Do you see the same, a similar Republican preference this year?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, because there are two arguments that are being made by the Republican Party that political scientists would see, two themes in the Republican advertising that political scientists would see as thinly coded racial messages. One of them is about Medicare and this dispute about the $776 billion Medicare expenditure. This is, first of all, on the one hand, designed to attract older voters, protecting their Medicare and Medicaid. But most of the recipients of Medicare and Medicaid are in fact white. So political scientists who study campaign advertising would see this as a suggestion in their advertising, that white voters that they're